Morning and welcome into the Sunday side session. I am Mike Schaefer, and this week joining me from 93.7 The Ticket, a man that knows ball, coached ball, played ball, has been around ball, has been, around NFL ball, has been around college ball, high school ball, has friends that still coach, still play, all of these things. We're bringing in Derrick Pearson, DP, as you know him, on 93.7 to talk about Nebraska, UCLA on Saturday. And DP, I got to be honest, I thought we would be talking today about Nebraska hitting that 6 win for the first time since 2016. I thought things were set up for the program to take advantage of what was a soft spot on its schedule against a team that UCLA isn't. I don't think they're bad. They're not without talent. They just hadn't played well. And I thought the things that they did well, Nebraska could counter. And I thought Nebraska could do things that UCLA would struggle with. That never really happened on Saturday. And so I guess to start with, let's just kind of get your general overview of what you saw Saturday in the press box and kind of what your thoughts are now here on Sunday morning.
Yeah, I walked into Saturday Charlie Brown ish. Like I knew that things lined up for something really good to happen. I felt like something good was going to happen, but Lucy still had the football, and I just kept Mike. I kept feeling like my level of trust was never in full, and rightfully so, because this program, not just this team, but the program hasn't earned that level of trust yet. We can this team, this year's version, got us to care. It showed us enough really good things and potential, and it showed us some ability. So we hoped that yesterday would lead to win six against a 2-5 UCLA team at home in front of the sellout crowd. But this program is still Lucy. The fans, we're all Charlie Brown. We hope things will go right. We hope that we don't end up, heels overhead, laying on the ground, stars circling our head. But Mike, they got us again. They got us again. That they said they weren't going to pull the ball. We hoped they weren't going to pull the ball. They pull the ball. And we wake up Sunday morning with stars around our head, a sore back, trying to figure out what's going on and how did we get here.
Yeah, and we fall between the Great Pumpkin arrival and Thanksgiving on that one.
We
So
fell for it. We fell for it. We fell for it. Look, UCLA, I mean, there's a difference between talent and ability to produce. UCLA, all you had to do was go on the field before the game and look on film. You saw talent. They have talented athletes. They have coaches that aren't really afraid. They put in the work. They figure they can outwork you because they have a history of doing so. But what we hoped was that the ghost had been cleared out of the room, that all the scars had finally been healed, and that Nebraska would figure out who they were. I've been talking about on the ticker, I've been talking about identity. Being able to look in the mirror and figure out who you are, how you're going to get through your tough times, and then what success looks like for you. And Mike, I asked the question yesterday morning. We still don't know who the best player is on this team. We don't know what their best offensive play is on this for this team. We certainly don't know exactly how strong this team is. We watch this team get pushed around. We watch this team get uh, moved in spaces in ways that look, teams are more athletic than the Huskers. I don't know that on this Sunday morning we know what the identity of this Nebraska football team is or this Nebraska football program. We still don't know. There's still question marks.
yeah, it's interesting because before the year, even before the first game of the Matt Rule era, the talk is that you want to be playing through your defense and you want to be a Big Ten football team and you want to play where, body blows and all of these things. And then a whole lot hasn't lined up in that regard. I mean, I believe that they want to be a defense first team, and I believe that they play through the emotion of their defense. And that's why Saturday, UCLA takes the ball first. And I don't know how it is for you, but I feel like you can tell pretty early in a Nebraska game what version of the defense you're going to get. And when a team just immediately starts driving down the field, we saw that with Northern Iowa, we saw that with Illinois, we saw that certainly with Indiana, and now we saw it with UCLA. Now they won the Northern Iowa game. The other three they lost, in part because when teams are able to just start picking up first downs and go right down the field, they took 8 minutes off the clock. They only got 3 points. They took 8 minutes off the clock. And suddenly it felt like Nebraska was, going to end up pressing. And of course, you come out 3 straight throws immediately. You hadn't seen UCLA's defensive look yet, but you're putting the ball in the hand of your freshman quarterback, and they're just coming at him right away. And he panics first 3 plays. I mean, he didn't look comfortable in any of that. And here you are sending your defense back out on the field right away, and they can't get a stop. They've barely been off the field. I think the defense eventually found itself, but early enough in the game, UCLA delivered some critical blows and built a lead, and then got to keep distance between themselves and Nebraska, even when it was 13-7. It still felt like Nebraska was really going to have to overcome not only UCLA, but itself once again. And they put themselves in that spot. And for a defensive-oriented team, like Iowa is a defensive-oriented team, and their defense goes out and makes plays. They set up their offense. They get off the field when they have the opportunities. They have havoc plays. Nebraska did none of that. They did none of that on Saturday. Like it's hard to be a defensive-oriented team when you can't force turnovers, when you don't get sacks, when you don't have tip balls, when you're never – I mean, teams are completing over 70% of their passes against Nebraska's defense right now. It is hard to be a defense-oriented team when they can do that. And so I don't understand how it is as difficult as it is for them week to week to play at a certain level. It's just very elevator-ish. I'm all over the place with these thoughts, so I'm going to throw it back at you here.
No, but Mike, that's what this team does to people who watch it and care about it. Is that you're just all over the place. The promise and the commitment was being smart, being out. You'll be more physical, right? That the long-term game was going to be that you weren't going to make mistakes and that you were going to move people. But 8 minutes, that 87,000 and whatever it was in the building sat on their hands for 8 minutes waiting for you to make a play to get off the field. And you finally make one that saves you from a 7-point deficit to a 3. So, okay, you held them to, you made a play.
Small win, yeah.
Right? Small win. Okay, there. Then you get to make your statement. They have salvoed and they have let you know what kind of day this is going to be. Like UCLA had a plan. And if you don't, people laughed at that UCLA coaching staff at Big Ten Media Day. And I said, you're missing the message. That dude's a brawler. That dude's a fighter. He is a grinder. He will figure it out. Listen, that dude has some tough days carrying the football. He figured it out. So 8 minutes of you standing there and then finding out that you're in a brawl, a grind, a meat grinder of a game, you then had a chance to tell Husker Nation who you were. Don't tell us, show us. And you threw the football. You threw the football. And guess what? They knew you were going to throw the football. And they acted according. They said, oh, you're going to take your 19-year-old and put him front and center. Hey, we have something for a young 19-year-old quarterback. We're going to throw him into chaos. Hey, man, we're going to throw some flies in the soup, some flies in the ointment. And they bailed. Listen, to tell me that you don't have an understanding of your talent and you don't have an understanding of your commitment and your mission. You're in Big Ten football in November. Since when is that a throw it 3 times first deal? When has that ever been the way that this works? And we literally talked about this offense, that if they do not have balance and they do not have the ability to be the physical team that they said they were going to be, then we're really just out here chasing ghosts. We're out here chasing ghosts, Mike. We're trying to eat soup with a fork. It's just not, it's going to be possible, but not necessarily likely. And the 3 passes allowed UCLA's defense to be the force in the first half. They were the dominant unit in the first half at Memorial Stadium because you kept allowing them to be. Not once did you square up and say, we're going to move you until we feel comfortable throwing the ball. And that's been Nebraska football. And that's, listen, it hurt to watch the 8-minute drive. It hurt to watch the 3 offensive plays in the first quarter. Three. Mike, you and I didn't even dress out, and they only had 3 more plays than we did. That can't be the plan, and that can't be allowed. You cannot. It's just lack of understanding that, listen, they have athletes. They know you because they coached with you. They coached around you. They had 2 weeks of your film study. And guess what? They were in your playbook. They were in your head. For the first half of that game, oh my goodness. And the one thing that UCLA didn't want to happen was for you to decide you were going to turn this into a closet fight. That was going to be the way. And Nebraska did what they did. It was a tough, brutal first half.
Yeah, well, and to add just some context to that, I mean, your leading rusher for the game, Dante Dowdell, I think 17 carries, 61 yards. I mean, nothing about that is spectacular. He only had 4 carries in the first half. I think they only had 7 attempts with their running backs total in the first half. I don't have it right in front of me right now, but it was minusculely low. And some of that, obviously, context of you only ran 3 plays in the first quarter. There's only so much that you're going to be able to do. But it all speaks to that. And it goes back to the idea that, last week we're talking about maybe they found something in their running game against Ohio State. Well, how do we know if you don't come out and you try to emphasize that running game early in the game against UCLA and then you're down 10-0 and you can't really emphasize the running game? You're fortunate that a taunting penalty saved you from another 3-and-out that was equally, bereft of play calling that builds on anything. And so you're fortunate that Ja'Cory Barney scrambles back to catch an underthrown ball to help set up the first touchdown for your offense. But here's the other thing, and I think this is almost more damning in some ways than the first half. You come out of halftime. It's 13-7. And I don't have any problem with the play call because Thomas Fidoni's wide open down the middle of the field. But again, you're given opportunities to be about what you've talked about, which is that you have found things in the running game and you want to try to emphasize the run and you want to be a body blow offense. And here's some more context. Which of these 2 teams came from the Pac-12 last year? Was it you or was it the team that averaged, somewhere around 60 yards rushing a game that then was able to run on your defense? One of those 2 teams came from the Pac-12. One of those 2 teams embodies what people around here refer to as California soft, but it sure wasn't UCLA, which we know is in Los Angeles. It wasn't them. They came from the Pac-12 and they beat up Nebraska on their own field. Like that's hard to say out loud.
That thing you just said, that UCLA team beat up Nebraska on their own field. Like they came to your party, challenged you, said, "Hey, come out front in the yard, bring your girl with her because I want her to see this, and I'm gonna beat you up." And and you're gonna let me. You're gonna let me do this. That first play of the second half, Mike, as they broke it and lined up, and I said because this is the statement play. because this was going to set the tone. And as they lined up with Fedoni inside, left hash, soft coverage, the linebacker that made the play actually made the wrong play. He said, Nebraska is going to run the ball here first play. So he bit the play fake and slipped and fell. He actually fell, got up, back turned. Raiola did what 19-year-olds do. Oh, I can go there now, right? Because that's his read. I can go there. Except that dude made a play. And you went away from the win, which was Fedoni. Fedoni could have had 2 runses, a soft drink, and some popcorn before anybody got to him. And you did a thing and you threw under. You threw under. And that reeks of you telling him the key here is over the linebacker. Like you told him, that's a programming thing because the scheme was ideal. But imagine that building and the rest of that game. He hits Fedoni waltzing down the middle of the seam by himself for 80 yards. And instead, he did the one thing that he couldn't do. And mind you, quarterback coaching and quarterback leadership is no down and distance situation circumstance. There was zero need to force above the linebacker at 1st and 10, first play, third quarter. That's quarterback IQ, football IQ, scheme IQ. Do not force 1st and 10. Don't do it. So you checked several boxes of not being aware, not being prepared, and certainly not making good decisions with it. So we were all in the press row. We are all looking around like, how are we seeing this and they're not?
Yep.
But that's been this offensive football season for Nebraska. How are they not seeing? How are they not coaching? How are they not boundering? How are they not implementing a simple thing, which is, Dylan, in this formation, the read isn't the linebacker because we're going to play fake him anyway. The read is going to be where the safety is. The corner was off. And the safety bit. Fedoni's running down the seam by himself. And at no offensive play, on no offensive scheme, no down and distance, where a quarterback who is aware doesn't take that layup.
Right.
And they missed the layup.
They missed the layup and they gave up a transition dunk.
Schaefer, that's exactly what it was. Like, this was, in spite of the 13-7 beatdown, right? The drudgery. I think at some point I was nodding because I thought I was going to fall asleep at being able to see everything the way it was. They had an opportunity, first play, third quarter, to get this crowd back into it, to get this team back into it. And if that's the play you call, now mind you, is that the best play Nebraska has? First play offensively, first play of the second half, it is a statement of who you are. What is the play that you can run with the highest level of success and productivity? That's what those are. And what we saw were you're 0 for 2 in the worst way. We don't know. Like you said in halftime, knowing you were going to get the ball. Wasn't a surprise. 1st and 10, what do you call? And you called something that you could not execute. That is a brutal, brutal statement out loud.
Yep. Well, and then it all gets reinforced in other ways later in that game too. And here's something that I am just dumbfounded by. I think Nebraska, and I talk about this every year, and it doesn't matter the coaching staff. I'm blown away by the lack of situational awareness. I'm blown away by the lack of urgency. You're inside the 10-yard line, down by 14 points, or down by, down by 13 points. You're down by 2 touchdowns, whatever we want to call it. There's just no urgency in the third quarter when you're down that way. In the beginning of the fourth quarter when you're down that way. Your play calling when the field gets short is always problematic because you don't do anything outside of, a couple runs here or there. I mean, if you were powering away at UCLA to start the second half or to start this game, your play calling gets easier inside the 10. The holes get bigger inside the 10. Your offensive linemen have more confidence inside the 10. Their defense and their defensive line is worried inside the 10. You know what they're not when you aren't able to do that, or you haven't shown the ability to do that, and then you get scared. You don't want Dylan to have to make a play. So you're going to get creative with how you're lining up your players, and you're going to try to sneak a handoff to your wide receiver that kind of everyone who has watched film and sees him lined up where he's at knows, well, that doesn't make sense. I got to keep an eye on that guy. Your play calling is not building on itself. So then you get inside the 10-yard line and you need gifts from the officials. You need miracles from the other team doing dumb things just to get points on the board inside the 10-yard line. They have one of the worst red zone offenses I think I've ever seen constructed. And that's amazing, DP, because we've covered Nebraska for several years. You've covered them for several years. I've watched this entirety of their 7 years of losing, where the red zone has always been an issue. And yet every single year, the field gets small. They get overly conservative. And because you haven't been building on it throughout the game, you can't just run the ball down someone's throat with 10 yards to go. It doesn't work that easily.
Here's this thing, the urgency, right? And you talk about situational awareness. That sometimes you call plays and you coach to not make mistakes, right? So you set the boundaries in play. But here's the other thing. If they don't make that, if they don't throw the pick six, first of all, they win the game.
Sure.
They win the game. And in spite of that, I want to say the fourth quarter, you ready for this? They had 20 plays inside the UCLA red zone.
Yeah. Oh, I am aware. I am well aware.
I was Macaulay Culkin. Like, oh my God, what is happening? How is this possible? And the fact that that identity thing, Mike, you don't know who you are, and you don't have it. Listen, everybody says offensive and defensive football in the Big Ten starts up front. And if you tell me that you were good enough to win a Big Ten game, I got to ask, what do you think of the offensive line play?
Like, it hasn't been good this year.
Like, right, watching folks be thrown out of the club in a brawl, in a chest-to-chest brawl inside the 20 for 20 plays. For 20 plays, you couldn't get that done? You put new players, brand new players, in to run. Wait a minute, what are you doing? You're going to do a thing that you haven't practiced, that you haven't been successful in? Show me the play where you have freshman receivers on the field who made those plays. In your most critical of offensive plays, you put people out there that they had no idea. You had no idea what they were going to do. So the play calling is just, look, I generally, as a rule, as a coach, try not to step on play call, right? Because you know your players, you see them in practice, you look at the film, you know what you want to do. But that's if it works. If it works, we leave it alone. If it doesn't work, and I mean 2 for 20 is not good. It's just not good. What are you trying to do? Like, Mike, how many times do you have to bang your head against the goalpost to say, I should probably stop banging my head against the goalpost?
Well, here in Nebraska, it almost seems like a lifetime of it.
It's a choice. It is a choice. Think of the psychological arrogance required to just say, I'm going to do what I want to do, whether it works or not. To just say, I don't care what the metrics say. I don't care what the stats say. I don't care what down and distance say. I'm going to call a thing because it's what I want to call, not because it's a thing that works. It's just mind blowing.
Yeah, and the part that I have the difficulty with is why are you two different teams based on the area of the field that you're in? When you're playing from the 25 with 75 yards to go, you're not as condensed and you don't play as tight and you don't do the things that you're doing inside the 10-yard line. But when it gets inside the 10, and again, it's reflective of coaching scared and playing scared, you get really conservative. You don't pack it in when you're at the 25. So why are you doing it when you're at the 9-yard line? And then why do you expect to be successful if you don't do it in other areas of the field, but magically you're going to do that well, inside the 10-yard line? It just doesn't compute with me. And then on top of it, okay, I think they're a team that's built where they have to pass the ball to set up the run. And I think they think that, but they don't want to say it out loud. And then they certainly don't do it in practice enough to have it build upon anything. If you're at the 9-yard line, shouldn't you have some sort of, you're either running drags or you're trying to set up your tight end against the zone in a spot that's going to be manageable. Their route concepts don't make sense when they're inside the 10-yard line. It feels like the only play that they have passing that they can ever execute, and it's rare that they do, and they've tried it a million times and they hit on it yesterday, surprisingly, is the fade to the sideline. And here's the other problem with that. When you run that play and you have one other receiver and you have one option on it for your quarterback, what is he supposed to do when it's not there? He just has to throw it out of bounds. So now you've killed another play. I don't understand. You get in there and you did this against Ohio State, and then you do it against UCLA, and it's like, well, we're just going to power our way through. Bullshit. You can't do that. You can't do that when it's 1st and 10 from your own 25. It doesn't make sense that when the field gets small, that's when you're going to play power when you don't play power or execute power elsewhere on the field. It just, and then unfortunately your quarterback gets hurt. You bring in Heinrich Haarberg, and in theory, there are plays and there are ways to utilize him that make a lot of sense, but it's contingent on either having run them and being able to run them successfully and then having the guys up front that can move people. And so you go to run a quarterback blast, you barely run that play all year. It looks exactly like a team that ran a play maybe 5 times in practice over the last month that now has to go try to run it in a critical situation where you got to have it. And that's what it looked like. I mean, it's the reason their most successful play inside the 5-yard line is give it to Dante Dowdell and he has to throw himself over the line. Have you seen a team that has to rely on jumping over the line this much? And we're not talking, with no offense to Dante Dowdell, we're not talking about LaDainian Tomlinson or Adrian, like an elite running back who's inside the 4-yard line or a million times. We're talking about this is Nebraska's this is our best play. Our best play is a running back that dives over the line of scrimmage in the goal line.
I literally had to catch myself in the press box, just screaming. What are you doing? The weapon. In my old coaching office, it was a two-word mantra: copy success. Copy success. I've never seen an offensive coordinator that refuses to copy success. If we run extra man point of attack football, that we can move 4 yards at a time, and then need 3 yards on 3rd and 4, and decide you're going to send your 260-pound tight end to the flat. His worst route and the most difficult throw. And they constantly do it. And then you say, okay, well, I'm going to stay away from the screen. And no, listen, tell me what your best play is in the most critical moments. Tell me who your best player is. Who's the most productive? We don't have a clue who the most productive offensive player is, because good offenses in those critical moments, you know who they're going to. You just can't stop it.
Yeah.
You just
Well,
can't stop because you can execute. We don't know.
right. Another thing that drives me nuts, like I feel like Ja'Cory Barney has emerged to being probably your most consistent, which is says a lot. A freshman wide receiver that's not physically built, and he's fast and he's quick, but he's not. I mean, he's not lightning fast here. But this is your most consistent player, I think, between the 20s. And yet, when the field gets small, do you think they have a route designed to create misdirection to get him open? The way that you see, we'll watch the NFL later today. We'll watch college football. There's other receivers besides Ja'Cory Barney that can score in the red zone. But for Nebraska, the only way that's going to happen is on a jet sweep handoff where they actually block it, because they don't run plays for Ja'Cory Barney in that area of the field. They don't have anything for him, which is amazing to me. I don't understand that.
But you don't have any attack move for a young quarterback. Rules of engagement. First price is to be able to run the ball. Okay, if you can't do that. Second of all, to have a tight end that you can put through clean, open, easy accessible windows for the short, compact, quick throws. Simple deal. This offense refuses to put Fedoni in an option route in front of Raiola for short throws and short gains. Hey, if it's not Fedoni, go second tight end. I'm sorry, Bonner. If you're not the guy, how about Carter Nelson? How about, I don't know, how about this? How about you run mesh concepts where you have speed burner receivers where a linebacker will not be able to sprint with Ja'Cory Barney for 40 yards, right? Like, I don't, like, there are concepts that are basic things, and it makes my head hurt that you have Thomas Fedoni. Listen, I don't need Fedoni going lateral. That's not what that. I don't.
We got to bring in Michael Brunch for this. He's going to lose his mind.
No, I don't. Like, what are you doing? Clean windows for young quarterbacks. A 19-year-old quarterback wants to be able to catch a snap and know I've got two tight ends on either side, bookends. They're going to option route to open space. If I want to fade my receivers to take a defender out of the play and to hold a safety, cool. Then it's just two athletic tight ends, one-on-one, with options for us to quickly throw. So listen, I'm not going to take a sack. I don't have to scramble. I don't have to do any of these things. And then, hey, here's another thing. How about we actually just flare those running backs? How about we just get them to the wide side of the field so that even if nothing else works, you've got a playmaking running back in open space with one man to beat. It makes my head hurt to watch. There are ways to beat what UCLA ran. They just simply chose not to do it. It's amazing.
Well, they chose not to do it, and it's questionable whether they can actually do it. It's one thing to be able to identify it. It's another thing to call it, and it's a third thing to execute it. And the failure exists somewhere on all three of those levels almost repeatedly on offense for them.
Well, I mean, if you tell me that you can't do a thing because you're not making blocks up front, right? You're not protecting at the level that you should. That's a question. Is the right scheme, right personnel? Because I have question about whether you have the right personnel out there to do the things that you need to do in critical mass, critical moments. I don't know. You see the practices every day. You see the players every day. All right, coach, I'm going to trust you on it. But then if you do those things and the schemes don't work, then I have to go back to the original thing, which is, what are you doing? What do you see that we aren't seeing? What do you know that we don't know? And then, quite frankly, you have to tell people. You have to share that, you know what? Here's what I thought. Here's what I saw. Here's what I expected. Because then we can fight for you. But we as media, we're not given that kind of access. And certainly they're not answering those kind of questions. So we're left to sit here, Mike, you and I, to ask Husker Nation to go along. And do we want them to trust the failed schemes and the failed play calls? Right? Because you and I aren't going to put our credibility up in a thing that we don't understand, can't understand, and doesn't make sense. That's what it was. Missed opportunity after missed opportunity after missed opportunity. 20 offensive plays in the red zone where you should be able, you can't work at a 10% success rate in critical moments in the red zone. You like, tell me what you tell me. if I'm Satterfield, I'm looking over my shoulder at Thomas and going, "Wow, that former Steelers offensive coordinator looks really interesting over there. I better do something pretty quickly."
Let's hit on a couple other things here, and this just kind of sticks with the offense. I mean, we could continue to go forever, and there's some things I want to do or talk about defensively. We're probably not going to get to today, but I don't want to let this one go because again, you've been around football a long time. You've coached football. You have a really good friend that is a high level quarterbacks coach. Talk to me about Dylan Raiola and some of the regression that we've seen from the guy that was, the go-to word to describe him in September was kind of gunslingerish. Like he was a gamer. He was out there making throws and doing things that we frankly hadn't seen at Nebraska in a long time. You get into Big Ten play, you get Big Ten defensive coordinators who give him different looks. He's taking Big Ten hits, and I don't think that's a small part of this. What do you think has happened with Dylan Raiola beyond just Nebraska's inability to put him in position to be successful? He's also just not seeing the football field the same way that he was in September, and it's hurting Nebraska in a big way.
Yeah, I mean he's a young quarterback, and we fall in love with the new shiny thing until it becomes a new shiny thing. You get a new watch, it's the best thing because it's new and shiny, and then the fade starts to happen. I think he's hurt. I think there are things in the beat up that are happening that his athletic arrogance has gone away, and that's in the head, in the eyes, and then in the feet. That comfortable movement, the things that he did naturally in the early weeks because he was the best athlete out there and he could make things happen. He could out talent a bad play call. He could out talent a strong coverage. He could do those things. But now people have tape on him and they know that, listen, I need to beat this kid up a bit early. And that's what's happening. I think that's a big part of it. I think also some of the verbiage that he's working with, the things that are in his head. It's important with a young quarterback for there to be positive information and a solution to situation and circumstance in his head. So no matter what is called, are you teaching him plays or are you teaching him how to play? And there's a difference between him being able to recognize first play, third quarter, my advantage, my win here, and looking for the win, is seeing Fedoni in a situation where if this corner gives room, Fedoni's going to have free relief. That should be the move. As you said, sometimes it's putting him in too many 1 and 2 receiver route combos, right? Because you can't protect him without the additional hammers, right? So all of those things in play, you're taking things out of his artillery. You're also putting boundaries on him about, I would imagine that there's some conversation about what the key is going to be, what target in this route combination we think is going to work. When quite frankly, if you think he's a Picasso, let him paint. If you think he can do these things, let him do these things. It just seems to me too mechanical, too rusty, too beat up. There is no athletic arrogance. And I think a big part of it is in his head, they need to reboot, recharge, reset, and let him play football. Let him play the quarterback position. Let him see the field and then make a decision. You're trying to stay away from interceptions. You're trying to stay away from sacks. But none of those as a priority allows me to find Mike Schaefer on a crossing route because it's the best decision rather than me throwing to the first target or one of 2 targets. I think they've got to free up some things. And that's where I think the conversation about offensive coordinators takes place.
You want to talk about a slow developing route, me running a crossing route, man.
Yeah.
You'd be waiting on that one a little bit. I think you hit on something for me with Raiola that I think was really noticeable in Indiana, and you saw it again at Ohio State, and then of course with UCLA. It's not that he doesn't have the physical gifts to do it, and I do think he's a little slowed by injury and banked up. I think, and we saw this with Adrian Martinez too early in his career, he is processing so much information that he is not playing football and he is behind. Like Ja'Cory Barney made an incredible catch up the seam on a route that he shouldn't have never had to adjust on the ball because it should have been there earlier. But Raiola is processing so much information, he's now behind the spots he's trying to hit. And so now you're requiring receivers to have to make plays on top of being open or what have you. So it's a deal where I think he's got so much going on in his head that it's hard for him to just go out and play football. And so when you're saying if he's a Picasso, let him paint, I'm just nodding my head because at some point, if you fill everything up in there, he's just not able to go do what comes natural. And what comes natural is why you want him. What comes natural is why he's a 5-star. And I think he's going to be a very good player. I'm not worried about him long term. But I think right now, you don't want him to be a robot. And when he becomes a robot, some guys can be a robot and they can process, spit it out, and it can just work. But it's not going to work at a super high level. For him becoming a robot, he's trying to get everything out of it. And it's causing him to be slow because he's like, all right, Barney's here, but what about, okay, I got to go back to Barney. There never needs to be the what about. You get the what about out of there because that ball needs to be out of his hands, hitting Barney where he has room to run and letting him go be an athlete. But that's what we're seeing happen, I think.
Yeah, it was interesting. Weeks 1 through 4, his anticipation was a part of why people got excited. That he was throwing to where the play was going to happen rather than where the play was. And those things have stopped. Those things have stopped. Some of it is teams identifying that if they spy him just to be in his line of vision, one, it keeps him from running. Two, it makes him hesitate in throwing the football. But there are ways to move those people and to force it. I'm a big fan of having. I don't care what quarterback it is. If you're running RPOs or zone reads early in the game, it has to be pulled so that there's two defenders who get taken out of defense because they know that the 11th player, can run the football. Like just that Dylan will be a threat. And I don't need for Dylan to run 30 yards with it. I need for him to pull it and get 4 yards and go back to the huddle. I need for him to take a linebacker out of the scheme, hold a safety, make a cornerback pay for not doing his job. Those are the things that happen. And when you don't do those things, young quarterbacks, you're putting two additional defenders back in play. Mike, UCLA doesn't defend from sideline to sideline. They defend from center hat to numbers. That's how they defend. And that's only how you attack. And if Nebraska hasn't identified that, listen, you got to remember they're defending 11 players against 5.
Yep.
You're defending 11 on 5. And the best way to break that 11 on 5 down is for a quarterback to move his feet. That's the only way that he's having success, and they're not doing it. They're just not doing it, and it shows up. Poor Dylan. I think he's beat up a little bit, more than we're being told. But I think the play calling is handcuffing him a bit too much. It's got blinders on him that you need to take off.
All right, let's finish up with this. Nebraska has 3 games left. Yesterday, once again, you want to talk about a program that just continues to miss seizing the moment, seizing the opportunity. DB, can you imagine Nebraska comes out, different version of itself. They win that game on Saturday. You come home, you flip the television on, and there's Wisconsin struggling with Iowa. There's Washington giving UCLA everything and winning that game. And those are your next 2 opponents if you're Nebraska coming off of a bye. You're 6-3. You're looking at that and you're thinking, all right, that game against Iowa, end of the year, that's going to be a fight. But we've got 2 opportunities in front of us against teams that are reeling. And instead, you're Nebraska and you're coming home and you're now 5-4. And you feel like you gave up an opportunity to get that 6 win out of the way. So now you got to go to USC and you got Wisconsin coming at home. And everybody knows that you haven't won a 6 game around here since 2016. And the pressure of all of that gets to build up throughout the bye week where there's going to have to be answers for why you lost to UCLA. And you're going to have to talk about that again. You're going to have to talk about the history and things that have nothing to do with you. And you get to play tight and you get to be clenched and you don't get to be loose. That's Nebraska football starting in that USC game. What's your confidence that they can overcome this? Because I think it is stacked against them now. I think mentally it's stacked against them. Physically it's stacked against them. We know that they aren't getting the best answers on the tests from their coaching staff to put them in positions. It feels like a tidal wave, and they're about to try to go out there and surf it. I just don't see how that's going to go well for them.
Yeah, it's 2 weeks of answering questions you don't have answers to. Like, you can't just say that, listen, we're not going to listen to outside noise. You better. You better. Like, to tell a player, get up there. It doesn't matter what anybody outside this building has to say. Actually, it does. In this space, in this NIL transfer portal, hey, we're going to pay you for being a Husker football player. Guess what? Yeah. What the folks outside matters. And you have to figure out some answers. And you can't give the same old answers. You can't pre-program and say, listen, I'm just smarter than you and I don't have to answer that. That doesn't work anymore in this day and age. It doesn't work. And if that's the path you're going to go, you're putting pressure on the young people. See, all of the pressure has to be on the paid professionals, on the adults. It has to be. This coaching staff has to say everybody is accountable for everything. And until I hear that from the staff, I'm a little worried. Like, the trust matter, I need for every coach to say that I am responsible for everything that happens here. Offensive line coach, responsible for quarterback play, responsible for running back play, which is responsible for receiver play, which was responsible for tight end play, which was responsible for putting special teams in difficult situation and circumstances, for not producing and not flipping the field and not making plays when they can and taking the air out of the building on a missed extra point as you rally at home, trying to come from behind and putting a defense that got 8 minutes on the field, stomped on its head, and then had to go back after and fight its way through halftime and then give up a pick six, so that this defense, off defensive line, linebacker play where you were out of position, you got run over a couple of times, defensive backs where you're asking them to do too much. Everybody is accountable for everything. Everybody is accountable for everything. The trust factor is for them to say, we're going to get it right. That's what I want to hear. No excuse. Don't have time. We're not building for the future. We're not doing anything. You know what? You got to win a football game, and everything for the fan base, for the boosters, for the university, for the players, for the coaches. Everything is built on you figuring out a way to beat USC in their building. Listen, you just got hammered in your building. You just got beat up in your building. So home field advantage doesn't really matter. Go to the Coliseum, in a place where those folks are going to be anxious anyway. And the last thing they want is for Nebraska to come in there and make that a 4-6 football team. Right? So go in, figure out, no excuse, make plays, and quite frankly, listen, keep their fans sitting on their hands for 35 minutes, and you have a pretty good shot. But Mike, it's a winnable game, but I just don't trust them. They have to earn that again.
I'm with you. I thought this was going to be a different season. I thought this was going to be a different team. Even when things started to point in an opposite direction of that, I thought they could pull it out. I liked the veterans that they had on the team. I thought the defense would be able. It doesn't matter what I think anymore. It matters what they show. And what they've been showing is the same problems from the same teams, regardless of coaching. And at some point, they have to either show us something different or we just have to accept what they are. And we're a lot closer to accepting what they are than I certainly thought we'd be at the beginning of this season. So,
yeah,
DP,
we didn't want to have these conversations, Mike. We wanted to cheer.
We go where the conversations are, not where we want them to be. And that is why I appreciate you joining me here on the Sunday side session. Everyone can check out your work at 93.7 Old School. Give us the hours. When can people catch you?
4 to 6 weekdays with Husker Hall of Famer Jay Foreman. One-on-one several times a week where I just get to rant and rave and talk good football and good coaching and good living. So, Mike, appreciate you for always doing what you do with us, for us, giving us the scoop, bro. Appreciate you, man, and congratulations on that adorable baby of yours.
Yeah, well, I thought Hudson was going to be the good luck charm of things. Everything else has gone pretty well for me sports-wise. Nebraska football, even my son can't overcome where Nebraska football finds itself.
Not yet. Not yet. Let him grow into it.
Yeah. Well, we appreciate it for Derrick Pearson, DP of 93.7 The Ticket. I'm Mike Schaefer, Husker 24/7. Check out everything we got going on at Husker247.com. We'll be back later this week with more Husker 24/7 content.